Okay, so now for lab 2, okay, we'll be looking into variables, declarations, and different types of data, in C# programming. Right, so before that, we're gonna be setting up our Unity projects. Right, so basically we have installed Unity the last round, and now we're gonna see how we can create a project and to complete this lab 2, which is on variables and data types. So before I look at the lab sheet details, right, so first thing first we want to do is to maybe start Unity Hub. Right, in this case, we're gonna go under the project tabs on the left, right, and we're gonna create a new project. Okay, so just make sure you're on Unity 2021.3 version. Okay, then we can choose 3D core. Okay, doesn't really matter for now, so just make sure you choose 3D core, and let's just name the project as lab 2. Okay, for now I'm just gonna save it on my desktop, and I'm gonna create the folder. Right, so it will take some time for it to generate and build. Okay, so now that our Unity project has been created, okay, so just some introduction to the UI. Okay, so first thing first, personally for me, I prefer to use a different layout, which is the 2x3 layout. Okay, in my opinion, I can see what am I editing and what will my player be seeing. Okay, it may not be as critical for now, but eventually this is what I use most of the time. And for this project panel here, normally I'll use the single column. Okay, right, so very quickly to introduce you the different columns, right, okay, or the different panels. Right, the very first one we have is the scene panel. So this scene panel, what it does is that it's mainly for us to edit stuff, move things around and put things. Right, we can actually create objects, okay, by right clicking inside the hierarchy panel and create a cube. Right, so over here we can move stuff, we can make them rotate. Okay, we can make it bigger, longer, or wider, so on and so forth. Okay, so the scene panel is mainly for us to edit our stuff and to design our level and sort of. Right, follow on is the game panel. So the game panel is what our player will see when we make our game. Okay, so it's kind of like a preview for them, you see. Right, so scene is for us to edit and game is for us to preview. So moving on to hierarchy panel, right? In this case, currently, everything in Unity is known as a game object, and here you can see we have got 3 objects, right? Mainly the camera, the lights, and a single cube. Right, of course, we can right click to add more objects such as a sphere, right, and we can move them around, right, or we can add other objects such as cylinder, move it around, and even shapes like capsule, right, and a couple other stuff. Right, so all these are the objects. Okay, so it's a list of objects that is currently in the scene. Okay, right, so this is the hierarchy panel that lists out all the objects in the scene. And beside the hierarchy panel, we have got the project panel. So in this case, project panels is where we have our assets are. Okay, so we can have things like our textures, audio, so on and so forth, 3D models. Right, so they will all be listed in the assets. Right, so from the assets we have, we can then put it onto the scene or the hierarchy panel, whereby it will be reflected on the scene depending on where we put it. Okay, so that's some of the differences between the panel. And lastly, we have the inspector panel. So for this case, inspector panel is kind of described the details of each object is there. So example for camera object, right, in the inspector panel we can see that we have got this thing called the transform. Okay, so this transform components over here has the position, rotation, and the scale. Likewise, it has a component, another component called the camera. Right, since it's a camera, then of course it has to have some camera features. And also we have another component which is the audio listener, right, so which is mainly for picking up sounds, not from your microphone but rather the sounds in the game. Right, and if we look at other objects such as the directional lights, right, we have 2 components here. One is the transform, position, rotation, and scale, and the light component, whereby we can set the type of lights, the color, so on and so forth, right? So I mean, a light gonna have a light component, right? For other primitive shapes and stuff, right, we have components such as the cube mesh or the mesh filter, right, which is kind of display the model, right? Then the renderer is to display the model, is to draw the model, and collider boxes for collisions. Okay, so in Unity mainly you have these few different panels lah. Okay, so very many times when we talk about look for things in the hierarchy panel or go and click on the inspector panels. So just make sure you are able to differentiate how all these panels are named and how to find their names. Okay, so moving on, another very important one, which is the play button. Okay, right, so the play button is actually for you to preview your game. Okay, for now nothing is moving, nothing is dropping, right? So if we want to have a feel of it, we can quickly go to the cube. We can add another component called rigid body, right? So rigid body will give it some physics property. So in this case, we just want this thing to fall onto the sphere. Okay, so when we press play, okay, then we should see this big cube falling down and interacting with some of the objects. Okay, right, so this is kind of the preview button. Okay, right, and as this is an introduction to programming C# module, okay, so another important panel that we need to get is the console panel. Okay, so these console panels allow us to see to print out details or to check the flow of the programs and stuff. Okay, so when create the console panel, okay, it goes to Windows, General, and Console. Right, so once we have got the console panel, then we want to dock it somewhere in the bottom. Okay, at least that's my preference. Right, so once we got the console panel, subsequently you can do print stuff and things and so on. Okay, and moving on to our very first script. Okay, we can create in our project panel under assets, we can create a new folder. Okay, we can call it scripts. Okay, and since this is the lab 2, okay, we're gonna create another script called lab 2. Okay, right, so with this script created, okay, we can double click and go in, which it will fire up Visual Studio. Okay, so in the typical script settings, okay, by very default, okay, you have things like your file name. Okay, so in C#, all the file names are named as .cs. Okay, C#. Right, so for this case, it's lab2.cs. Another very important thing is that your class name, okay, have always got to be the same as your file name. Okay, it has to be case sensitive, font sensitive. I mean, everything must be the same. Okay, class name and file name. Right, by the very default, Unity will give you a start function and as well as an update function. Right, as the comments has already written there, start is called before the first frame update, and update is called once per frame. So if your game runs at 60 frames per second, technically it will be update function, right, will be called 60 times. Okay, so that's the difference between the start. Start is only being called once, and update function will be called 60 times. Alright, so that's kind of how you set up a project with the scripts for your lab sheets. Okay, so moving on to what is lab 2 about. Okay, so lab 2 itself is declaring of variables and different data types. Okay, so I'll leave most of the reading to you, but in general, C# itself has two types of variables. Okay, so the value type and the reference type. Okay, so we'll just quickly see what's the difference of them. Right, so for the value types, you have got things like bool, okay, which is important. Char is character, so character typically is a single alphabet of characters. Okay, so bool can only store true and false. Right, char is a single character. Int is also important. Int is for it to store whole number. Okay, right. Okay, so this is for it to store true and false. Right. then this is for single character, int is for whole number, small c, yeah. Then float is for okay. So these few are the more commonly used in your programming, at least. Okay, so decimal is for you to store other numbers as well, but I personally rarely use decimal numbers, right? So mainly is bool, int, and float. Okay, that's double also quite rarely, unless you need something with very high precisions. So kind of like many decimal place at the back. Okay. So as for reference type, right, mainly there will just be string for now. Okay, so string is basically things like storing names. Right, names is a string of alphabets. So like names, description, right, what other stuff, addresses, so on and so forth. Right, so string is mainly for your strings, okay, for your text. Okay, so how do you write a variables in C#? So basically always you have your type, which is the bool, this is the name, and the default is true. Okay, for this case, so we assign true to it. And for characters, okay, the type is just char, and the name of the variables, and the characters that you want to store, and int. Okay, so int, then this is the name and followed by the value that will be stored. Okay, so same as a float and double, right? But the catch here is that for float, right, just take note that we differentiate the two decimal numbers, okay, with a f. Okay, so that's how we kind of differentiate floats and double. So without anything, then it's kind of double. And if you want to store a float, then you need to include the f at the back. Right. Moving on will be decimal. So decimal itself is basically used to store 128 bits. So basically you can have more, you are able to store a bigger number lah, okay, and it's defined with the prefix of a m. Okay, so f is float, actually double is d, and m is for decimal. Right, so moving on will be the string. Okay, so the type string, okay, this is the name of the string and the value that we want to store inside. Okay, so variables are nothing but just containers to store information. It can be whole number, decimal numbers, or even a string or a text. Okay. Alright, so some example. Okay, so when you type your codes, okay, always be careful, it's case sensitive. Okay, and in C#, right, always you need to have a semicolon at the end of every line. Okay, so we're gonna type some variables, okay, mainly bool, int, char, float, double, and decimal, and followed by a string. Right, so if we move back, okay, so there's a couple of places that you can type. Okay, so in C#, right, there's all these curly brackets. Okay, so all these are the scope. Okay, right, so if we declare a variable here, so example integer, my int, my first integer. Okay, so this is the name of the variable. Okay, I just gonna put 0 for this case. So we can use my first int, this variable, within this scope. Okay, look at the curly bracket. Within this scope, we all can use. Right, likewise, if we go and do it another variable, okay, so in this case, right, my second int is only valid within the curly brackets here. Okay, right, so in C#, always just make sure you have a semicolon after each line, and if you got a function and stuff, make sure you have curly brackets. Okay, right, so you cannot use this variable on other brackets. okay, because it's only valid within, but we can use the first in because it's within the bigger brackets, okay. That is the difference. Okay, so very first, quickly, we're just gonna make a few variables. Float. Okay, so for this case, 5.12 f, okay, double. So for this case, double, you can store more floating points, more numbers. Right, what else? Char. Okay, char is for us to store a single character. Okay, then what else? Decimal. M, okay. Right, so one more is the reference variable, which is the string. Okay, so string can be my name equals to Sean Tan. Okay, example. You can have space as well, no problems. Okay, so that's how you declare variables within a scope. Okay, so this is all these variables here you can use everywhere in this file. Okay, so moving on. Okay, you can also change the value inside these variables. Right, so example, now I want to change my name to, I want to change the variable my name. I'm no longer called Sean Tan. Okay, so I can use my name. Now I gotta change the second. Okay, so now the value will have been changed from Sean Tan to Sean the second. Okay, we can see the value of all this stuff by doing a print. Okay, so we can print my name. Okay, semicolon. Okay, so the caption here, my name is, okay, then the variable in this case will be Sean Tan. Okay, then if I do a change of a name, okay, so this will be to, right, then this will be to change the, then finally let's display the name. Okay, so there's a change of the name. Okay, so with these few simple lines of codes, okay, you can go back to Unity, clear the console, and then do a run again. Okay, so we notice that nothing is appearing because, okay, we have not applied our script to the objects. So let's put lab2 into the main camera. Okay, okay, so you can click on the main camera and then drag and drop lab2 script into the game object. Okay, so now you can see that we have able to display the information. Okay, okay, moving on, there's another keyword called the const. Okay, so const is basically for values that is not gonna change. So for this example is a pi, right? Pi is always 3.1415, right? So we can do that. Okay, so go back to our script. Okay, we can create another variable, right? So since const is a decimal number, right? So we're gonna use float pi equals to 3.1415. Okay, f semicolon. Okay, and because this value is never gonna change, we can add the const. Okay, likewise again, we can print out this variable. okay, at the start function. Okay, the pi is pi. Okay, so this will show us the 3.1415. Okay, so now we can see our pi is being displayed on the console. Okay, moving on. So this is some housekeeping that we have already done. Okay, in Unity we can create folder, we can create scripts, and we can organize them properly. Right, so all these have already been done. Okay, the folder has been created as well, so we are all good. Right, there we have it, and our script. Okay, so this is kind of pretty much what is it for LabSheet 2. Okay, you can continue with the rest of the practices. Okay, so for this is you're gonna add two numbers together. Right, followed by you can save them. Okay, so to save you can use Ctrl S, or you can do a file save. Okay, right, so pretty much this is it for Lab 2. Okay, so please continue with the rest, okay, which is to create all these variables and then print them out. Okay, so if you want to do it, you can follow through. So we're gonna create all these variables very quickly. Okay, so let's get back to our script. Okay, let's add a comment. Okay, so the very first one we gotta do is the string, and the name of the string is student name, and we're gonna name it Tom. Okay, followed by the next one is integer. The name of the value is, and the value is 55. Next will be float height and width. Okay, so you can have a float height, okay, semicolon, and height is 1.85. Gotta put that a float. Then followed by width 73.2. Right, then next is decimal and Sing dollar. The rate will be 2987.5.75. Okay, so decimal we need to have an M prefix, and next we have the exchange rate. Okay, so for consistency's sake, right, let's just put all the variables names start with a small caps. Okay, so what's the exchange rate is gonna be 80.68. Oops, M. Next will be the yen. Which is 0. Okay, right, so now we're gonna do some simple calculation. Okay, so that is we can do that in our start function. Okay, and for this case Japanese yen will be Sing dollar times exchange rate. Okay, right. And for here they ask us to use debug log can. We can do that as well. Okay, so we can do a debug to display Japanese yen. So we're gonna write a string. Then we're gonna add the variable. So we're gonna join them together. Okay, so we should see this. Okay, so let's see if we can display the Japanese yen value. So save and run. Okay, so we can see our Japanese yen amount is 24103.15. Okay, so 24103.15. So we are all good. Okay, so now before you submit, right? Okay, stop your Unity. Okay, then make sure you close everything. Okay, right, so for lab 2, let's rename to index number underscore your name. Okay, then right click, send to compress zip folder. Okay, so this will take some time because for Unity it generates a lot of little files. Okay, so when you submit, just always make sure you submit the zip folder. Okay, do not submit a single scene, do not submit a single code, because you need the whole projects in order to run, in order to open. Okay, it doesn't make sense to send a single code file and hope that it works. Okay, right, so this is gonna be the file that you should be submitting to your My Connection. Okay, right, so the file size is about almost 100 meg. Okay, not the smallest file for that little things. Okay, so I guess that's it for lab 2. Okay, so yeah, so a quick recap is to understand the variables, the type of variables, and what are they used for. Okay, so that's pretty much it for this lab. Okay, subsequently you'll create more variables, and in the next lab you'll do more arithmetic operations such as addition, multiplication, subtraction, so on and so forth. Okay, so with that said, that's lab 2. Okay, I hope you guys can get it done quickly and understand the concept easily as well. Okay, so that's all. Good luck. Thank you.